New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here, and you are here on the Inclusive Church, or I guess I am here on the Inclusive Church. We are here on the Inclusive Church every Tuesday at noon Mountain Time. Welcome, welcome. Just in case this is your first time, I do always like to repeat two things. One, inclusive church. And why am I using the word church? When I use church, I'm not talking about a building or the property. I'm talking about the people. And so anytime you hear me say church, unless I say a church building, I am talking about how important it is for us to reclaim the word church as the people who come together to learn, teach, practice, and expand their understanding of spiritual principle. And then you will hear me throughout the show today and every week talk about what leaders do that can result in the spiritual community or the church being inclusive. And when I say leader, I've had people ask me, well, should I be listening to the show? Should I be watching it? Because I'm not a minister. Let me assure you, if you are someone who is leading a team or providing regular financial donations or making suggestions or teaching a class or simply showing up in a way that impacts others in your spiritual community, then you are a leader. You do not need a title, a license, a certification, unless you're part of a spiritual community that requires that. But I don't know of any spiritual communities that do. So leader means you're here, you can be a leader. Some weeks I have featured guests, and actually, in case I don't remember to do this at the end, I want to tell you now that next week I will have two featured guests. We're going to have a conversation about what does it mean to be inclusive when you are actually sharing your property, the property where you often meet, with people from a different spiritual tradition. And how does that support being inclusive? What have you learned about being inclusive in your own community and in sharing physical space with people who practice a different spiritual faith system? So that's coming up next week. But today, no guest. Today, what I thought would be kind of fun to do is talk about a variety of quotations, inspiring quotations that inspire us as leaders, either inform us as leaders what it means to be inclusive or inspire us to be inclusive. And so we're just going to go through a variety of quotes. Feel free to put your comments in the chat or in the comments section as I share different quotations, if they really resonate with you or if you have questions about them. And please, I can see we've got people on Facebook, we've got people on the New Thought Media page and the YouTube, and we've got someone on LinkedIn. So please feel free to follow Jose's example and say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and share where you're dialing in from. We've got Shay with us today from Colorado. So yeah, you may not be able to see comments from all the different places where we're streaming, but yeah, I can see that you are streaming in from a variety of places. So I'm going to start with a Tracy Brown quote. I really hadn't planned to do that, but it just happened to be the quote that was first up. And so this quote is one of the ones that I really love. Ignoring the beauty and value and uniqueness of different types of people is equivalent to ignoring God and refusing to see all the ways God shows up as humanity. Ignoring the beauty and value and uniqueness of different types of people is equivalent to ignoring God and refusing to see all the ways God shows up as humanity. Now, the reality is that you may not prefer the word God. You can replace that with spirit or universal mind or love or whatever word works for you. No matter what word we use, we are not going to be able to encompass the infinite nature of the infinite intelligence that is the creator of all life. And so some of these quotes may use God, they may use spirit, but the point is actually the same. And so I love this quote for a lot of reasons, not just because I wrote it, but because it reminds me that there is one creator. There is one creator. And that creator is expressing itself in everything that it has created, including all the many different types of human beings. And so when we are committed to being inclusive in our spiritual communities, it really is a good reminder as a leader, or if I am preparing volunteers to be greeters or to provide programs and services, it's really a great reminder to say that every person who shows up in our community is showing you the face of God as they are. And for me, this is really foundational in terms of, if you've read the Stained Glass Spirit book, the first section of the book and the first chapter really goes into my belief that diversity is a divine idea. It is an idea that comes directly from the creator of all life. There are no accidents, that each one of us has been created uniquely and individually. And so this is really the foundation behind this quote. Ignoring the beauty and value and uniqueness of different types of people is equivalent to ignoring God and refusing to see all the ways that God shows up as humanity. Next quote. God is all there is, and we are direct and beautiful expressions of it. Each one of us is the expression of the divine. And so when we can remember that, and remember that there really is nothing outside of God, nothing outside the circle of God. So when we remember that, then we get to remember that each one of us is an expression of this one. Each one of us is the expression of that. So again, what I'm sharing with you are just different quotations, and I would love it if there's a quote, a quotation that really speaks to you, or that makes you think of an example that, something that's happened in your life. Feel free to comment about it in the chat. In the Baha'i faith, there is a core principle, and that I think captures so much of what we want to do when we say we want to be inclusive. Since all humans have been created in the image of God, God does not make any distinction between people, regardless of race or color. Repeating, since all humans have been created in the image of God, God does not make any distinction between people, regardless of race or color. Now, I know you, like me, understand that when we're talking about the inclusive church, we are not limiting our conversations to people from different racial, ethnic groups, or limiting our conversation about inclusion to simply skin color or skin tone. So when we are saying inclusion, we do mean all forms of inclusion. And this particular quote is a basic Baha'i principle that is reminding us, as it relates to race and color, that spirit makes no distinction, no judgment of one group being better than another group, of one group being superior or less than another group. Because think about it, right? All people have been created in God's image. So that this quote is one that I have found really helpful in a lot of different conversations related to being inclusive. We are all a part of one life. And at the same time, we each have our own life, our own individual life. I like this quote and have used it in a number of talks and a few classes, because sometimes, especially in New Thought, we talk a lot about oneness. We talk about how we are all a part of one life, one expression. And sometimes what happens then is that people begin to think about that as, well, we're all part of one life and we're all the same. And so I don't need to pay attention to the ways that we're different from one another, because there's only one life. Well, the one life that is the life or the expression of divinity, of God, of wholeness, of oneness, can only be what it is because it is inclusive of all the individual expressions, all the individual emanations or expressions of itself. So I have found this quote to be really helpful in those settings where there is some confusion about oneness implying sameness, because that would be an incorrect assumption. Oneness does not imply sameness. We are all a part of one life, but maybe this quote should be but instead of and. But however, when I wrote it, it was like, no, and both are true. We each have our own individual expression, way to express life and experience life. And at the same time, it takes all of us together to make the one life. So hopefully that's not confusing. Hopefully you're sitting there going, oh yeah, that's right. Or I get that. I have had a few people over the last 10 years be a little confused by this. But this is the kind of quotation that we can use when we are leading a group or when we are having a dialogue, that we can use this kind of quote to help people talk about, well, what does oneness really mean in the context of being inclusive, right? So what I encourage you to do is to find quotations that make you think or that reinforce what you believe and the reasons that it's important to be inclusive, and use those quotations in conversations with people. And one of the reasons I do this too is because even though I've shared and I will share some that quotes that are from my book or from something that I have said before, it's not that it has to be your own quote, because you don't want to turn your dialogues into debates about whether you're right or wrong and the other person's wrong. And so sometimes it's really helpful to use quotes from other people or from other sources. And yes, Shay, the idea or the concept of a holographic universe is for people who've been exposed to that concept, right? It's like, oh, yes, I'm seeing multiple expressions of really the one thing. And also, when I look out, right, I'm also seeing that reflected back in me, or I'm looking at it being reflected in others. So love that. Now, the good thing about this is I opened this folder that has different quotes, but I haven't previewed them all. So I'm not really sure what's coming up next, but let's see. Oh, I love this quote. I use this quote so much, and I love the person who wrote it. So, developing acceptance requires you to get out of your comfort zone. Developing acceptance requires you to get out of your comfort zone. Now, there's several reasons I love this quote when we're talking about building and maintaining an inclusive church. Number one, the first two words, developing acceptance. So often we think, well, I just accept everyone, but we actually have to work to develop and build the muscle to accept people who are different from us, because at least for most of us, we were raised around people who were more like us than unlike us. So we may have been, in school with some people who were different from us, but our close relationships, there's a common connection that keeps us together. And for some people, school was that as well, that they went to school in their own neighborhood with people, or they went to a school where the thing that everyone had in common was their like social or class level. And so it may not just be by race or gender, but that there were more similarities. So most people grow up in neighborhoods where there is more similarity than difference. Most people go to church, if they go to church when they're young, with, their parents have joined a church where everybody at that church is sharing a spiritual or religious process and system and dogma and beliefs and practices. And you tend to shop right in the same stores, and your relatives, you're individuals, but you're bound by family, by blood, by marriage. And so we are trained from a very young age to look for the commonalities. And this quote from Lenora Billings Harris reminds us that we must build the skill of developing the skill of being accepting. Developing acceptance requires you to get out of your comfort zone. And we want to be comfortable. I mean, who wants to go around being uncomfortable every day? Some of us have had that experience because we are in an environment where we are different in a significant way, and we get comfortable being uncomfortable. We understand what it's like to get out of our comfort zone. But if you've mostly been in your comfort zone and then you become a leader or a congregant or a participant in an inclusive spiritual community, wow, it's uncomfortable for a lot of people. So as a leader, I try to keep in mind that I sometimes have to allow for people who are not used to being uncomfortable, that it's my job as a leader to help them become more comfortable. So, yes, developing acceptance requires you to get out of your comfort zone. Thank you, Lenora Billings Harris. Ralph Waldo Emerson, I have loved this quote since I was a teenager. What you do speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you say. Why is this an important quote to keep in mind as a leader of a spiritual community that is committed to being inclusive? It's so important. It's like the saying that many of you are familiar with, action speaks louder than words. Right. But this was Ralph Emerson's take on that. What you do, your actions actually are speaking so loudly or communicating so loudly that I can't hear or I don't believe what you are saying, the words that you are speaking. This is critical as a leader. You want there to be alignment between the words you say. You say that you are inclusive or a community that's inclusive. You say that you see everyone as the face of God, but then people who are watching you or people who are participating in your classes or events watch you and observe you behave consistently in ways that counteract the words you speak. So our goal as leaders is to have consistency and alignment between how we talk about our intention to be inclusive and how we behave. And you know what? I've said this to so many people, and I've had a few people give me feedback that it made a difference for them. And it's this: the intention to be inclusive is good. And you can expect that you're going to make some mistakes. So it is really important for you to have a few people around you who know that you expected them to pull your coattail or to tap you on the shoulder or to send you a text message saying, this is an example of where your actions are not in alignment with your words. You want to have some people who you have told, please tell me, don't wait for me to ask. Because otherwise, you will find your intent and your impact are clashing. They're not matching up, and no one's willing to tell you because you're the leader. And they will walk away, or they will talk about how you said some things that were inappropriate, but they won't come and tell you that unless you have really set up an environment over time where people know you really do want their feedback. So we can't forget that what we do often speaks more loudly than the words that we use. Thank you, Ralph Emerson. I can't change society for you. I can change society with you. Now, some of you have heard me use this quote. I don't know why it feels like I'm losing my voice. So I am taking 10 seconds. And I invite you to also say a quick treatment or prayer or hold the energy that my voice is really fine. And let's talk about this quote. I can't change society for you. I can change society with you. In the Stained Glass Spirit book, there is a chapter where I talk about the difference between a charity mindset and a strategic partnership. When you approach being inclusive from a point of view that I am doing something to make the world better for you, whatever the group or identity group the you is, right? Oh, we're doing this, we're being inclusive because we want to help the LGBTQ plus community. We're being inclusive because we want to take a stand so that our Spanish speaking community is getting more respect. I'm not saying that that's completely wrong, but when we do things with a charity mindset, it's like, I'm good. My life is fabulous. Now I'm going to help you out because, you've got problems. And, there are times when any of us or all of us may jump in and do something to help. But our inclusive church focus is not about helping some group that has less than. Remember, we've already acknowledged that every person is the face of God showing up. And so Together, we can change the world that we work in or that we live in. Together, we can create a spiritual community where everyone or people from many, many different identity groups find it healthy and open and engaging to be in spiritual practice or learning spiritual principle together. But we're doing it together. I'm not doing it to all of a sudden make it a place, make our spiritual community a place that now you can come to and become a better person, except in the context that all of us want to expand our use of spiritual principle to guide our lives. We all want to be better, but not because you need to be better because you're from a specific identity group. That's a piece that this quote really helps us get in touch with. I can't change society. And maybe it should say, I won't change society for you, but let's change society together. Let's do it together. Ernest Holmes, the founder of Science of Mind, wrote, circumstances do not change themselves. They are always molded by someone's thought patterns. OMG. What are all the reasons I love this quote? I could probably do a full 45 minutes just on this one quote. I won't, but I probably could. As someone who is committed to being an inclusive leader, it's important to remember this concept. In New Thought, right? We're here on the New Thought Media Network. And often in New Thought communities, there will be people who have gotten exposed to some of the basics, and they have an assumption or a belief that what we teach in New Thought is that you are responsible for everything that happens to you. But actually, that's not what we teach. We teach that you are responsible for how you navigate everything that happens to you, everything that happens in the world, that each one of us is able to use mental thought and use our thoughts to drive or to influence how we take up whatever is happening in the world and how we design and create or co-create lives that work. But when we don't really understand it at the deeper level, that's when you hear people saying to others, well, what are you thinking that caused you to have cancer? Well, what are you thinking that is the cause of you getting fired and now being unemployed for the last 10 months? What is it in your thoughts that caused you to have this negative experience? We do it on the opposite end as well, where there are times when people will, again, take just the surface level and say, well, what is it that you thought, or why is it that one person is thinking that they can be wealthy and they're wealthy, and the other person is thinking that they must have been made to be poor, like it was God's decision. So this quote is really from Ernest Holmes, one of the ways that we can remember that everything that happens, it's molded by someone's thought patterns, often our own influence, what is going on in our lives. And it definitely, our thought patterns determine how we navigate whatever is happening. But it doesn't mean that we are only molded by our individual thought patterns. We are molded, or our lives are molded by our individual thought patterns, the thought patterns of the people we interact with the most. That could be family, that could be coworkers, that could be church members. Our experience is impacted by the thought patterns of the community where we live, the cultural norms we've been socialized to operate within, the world consciousness or global consciousness around what's right and wrong or how things should be. All of those thoughts are molding our individual and our collective experiences. So, why am I taking 5 full minutes on this one quote? Because if you want to be an effective leader in an inclusive church, then you must recognize that people from different identity groups actually do have different experiences. And when you bring all different kinds of people together, it will also change the thought pattern of your spiritual community, because the collective is different than it might have been 5 years earlier, or 10 years earlier, or 20 years earlier. If you are attracting diversity into your community, then you must be prepared for the reality that the consciousness is going to now be different than your own personal individual consciousness. It must happen because circumstances do not change themselves. They are always molded by someone or some group's thought patterns. Now, I'm hoping you're finding this interesting, inspiring, informative, that you're getting some kind of value out of just hearing and considering different quotations and how you might use them to either educate yourself or to use in conversations that you may have with others. So this Howard Thurman quote, I've said I love every one of these, haven't I? And that's probably why I put them together in a slide deck, because I actually love them, but I use them as well. So Howard Thurman wrote, all men, and feel free to translate that to all humanity or all mankind or all humankind. All men belong to each other, and he who shuts himself away diminishes himself, and he who shuts another away from him destroys himself. This quote is one of the ones that I use often to remind myself of why I feel it's so important. I don't want to cut myself off from others, and I don't want to cut others off from me. And the idea that when I push others away, I diminish myself. I don't know as much about the world as I could know if I were actually engaging with lots of different kinds of people. And when I, shut others out and and make them unwelcome intentionally, I'm destroying that part of me that knows the wholeness, that we're all connected, the unity, the spiritual value of unity, that we are all a part of the same, all created by the same source. So Howard Thurman gives us that reminder. And if you are doubtful about whether or not it's up to you to be an inclusive leader, then put this James Baldwin quote on your mirror and read it every day. The world is before you, and you need not take it or leave it as it was when you came in. Whew. I cannot tell you how many conversations I have had with people who say, well, that's just the way it is. Racism existed when I was born, and I didn't make those choices, and it's always existed. And, it's just something we have to live with. No, James Baldwin reminds us, I don't have to take it or leave it the way it was when I came in to this world or when I became an adult. And so if you are a leader in an inclusive community, part of your job is to make sure that you are doing things that interrupt, if not end, racism, homophobia, the exclusion of people with disabilities, that you, through your words and actions, make your spiritual community someplace that is welcoming intentionally to people of different age groups, to people who speak different languages, to people who have had different experiences based on their profession or their socioeconomic level. What are you doing that changes the world from the division and the polarity that you grew up knowing or that you see happening around you, because you recognize you can be part of the change? Now, I think I have time for maybe one or two more. And I want to encourage you in the coming week, if you have favorite quotes that have come up that you have used, like, not the quotes I'm using, but you have quotations that have meant something to you, that you pull them out and you remind yourself, this is why I choose to be inclusive. This is why it's important for the spiritual community I am leading, or I am one of many leaders within. This is why it's important, because it's easy to forget. It's easy to be on automatic. And maybe you know from a very deep level why it's important to you. It can be hard sometimes. So being able to access quotations from a variety of people can be really helpful. Defina Kufika. Yes. We are here to transform who we are as human beings from a place of wisdom, not desperation. We are here to transform who we are as human beings from a place of wisdom, not desperation. I think that is a big part of what this show is all about. The Inclusive Church on New Thought Media Network is about helping me and you and everyone work toward change, transform our spiritual communities and then the world from a place of wisdom. Not because we're desperate, not because we're just angry and reacting. We may be angry, but then we turn our anger, we channel that into a strategic approach to transform the experience that people have in our own spiritual communities and prepare them to go into the world, into their families, into their workplaces, into their schools, into the neighborhoods where they live, being a model of what it means to be inclusive, what it means to live with, in a positive way, people who are different from oneself. And recognizing that everyone is different from oneself, and there will be commonalities and there will be differences. But what we have in common is that we each are a face of the Creator. So these quotes are ones that I just really, really love. I hope that you heard 2 or 3 that are meaningful for you. I hope that maybe there were 2 or 3 that you really loved, and you'll send the recording to other leaders in your spiritual community, or that you will just take them in and be inspired to look for and collect your own quotes. Because truly, we're here for transformation, individual transformation, as well as group or collective transformation. And our New Thought spiritual communities are the places where we really have the opportunity to apply our spiritual principles and our spiritual practices in the world in a way that results in inclusion becoming the norm. And if you have been working on this idea for a while and you'd like kind of a master class where you get to practice at the next level, then just be aware that in the month of July, I've got Speak Up, Step Out coming up, and you can register for it now. And it's 4 weeks. Excuse me, on Tuesdays in the month of July to really go deep. Or if you're someone that's just beginning on this journey, or you're interested in the journey, but you need more of the basics to apply and practice the basics. And beginning in June, I'll be leading a 6-week program that will help you build your toolkit. And it's not a book study of the book Stained Glass Spirit, but it is organized so that it does align with the content in the book Stained Glass Spirit. So thank you for joining me today on Inclusive Church. We do this every Tuesday at noon Mountain Time, and it's streaming, so you already know. If you can't be with us live at noon Mountain Time, you can always go to YouTube, LinkedIn, or several different Facebook pages where we are streaming, and you can watch it later in the day or later in the week. I'm so glad to be sharing this world with you and sharing this commitment to being inclusive. My name is Tracy Brown, and I'll see you again next week.
Thanks for watching The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Join us again next week at 12 noon Mountain Time.